everyone, and welcome to the Squad Room Podcast, the place for cops who want to transform their leadership, create more resilience, and generate more balance in their life. On this show, we cover the tactics and strategies you can use every day to create a life worth living, both in and out of uniform. My name is Garrett Teslaw, and I'm a full-time lieutenant for a sheriff's office in Southern California, and I'm glad you're with us today. Before we get to our guest, I want to remind you of a few things. First, if you're on social media, make sure you're following us at The Squad Room and that you've liked our Facebook page. Also, make sure to join our Facebook group. Just search the Squad Room group to join. But most importantly is that you head over to thesquadroom.net and get signed up for our mailing list. People on that list get exclusive access to free resource downloads and a weekly email from me on things you need to know about. I also send out content that's exclusive to that list, so don't miss out on something that can help you in your life or in your job. Join our list at thesquadroom.net. I recently had an experience that made me so thankful to have officerprivacy.com as a partner in keeping my family safe. Like many of you, I'm often tasked with handling media inquiries around newsworthy events that my agency is involved in. We had an anti-government and anti-police group that got some media attention recently, and my name was out there in the papers as our spokesman on the issue. It turned out that some of the agitators don't live very far from me. It was a troubling reminder I'm often confronted with, one that is made worse because I live in the area where I also work. It's not uncommon for me to encounter people at the grocery store, the gas station, or the gym that I've had some sort of professional interaction with. I'm constantly reminded of how easy it is to be exposing my family to the dangers of my job, and how easy it is to find information about me on the internet. So on the same day that my name was out there in the papers and on the internet about this anti-police group, I got my regular report from officerprivacy.com. The report showed me how they're monitoring the top 50 people search sites on the web to make sure that my information is deleted and stays deleted from these sites. They wipe your information from sites like LexisNexis and Spokio, White Pages, and many more. OfficerPrivacy.com offers 2 packages to choose from to help you clean up your side of the internet. Their premium service allows you to sit back and let the professionals do the work, where they will scrub the internet's top 50 people search sites that can expose your home address. They then work to maintain your privacy by monitoring those same sites. If you show up again, they'll remove you again. They also offer an at-home solution for those of you that have the time and the technical ability. Using their proprietary software, you can remove yourself and your family members from those same top 50 people search sites on the internet, and then use the software to conduct audits as often as you'd like to make sure that you haven't been added back. To learn more about how they can keep you safe, check them out at officerprivacy.com/the squad room. When you sign up through that link, you'll get 2 free months of monitoring and data removal, plus a free cell phone privacy device when you sign up. Shift bids to overtime and special events, vacation requests, court overtime, and unexpected critical incidents and major disasters. The schedule is like a living, breathing beast that must be wrestled with at every level of an agency. If your agency is still living in the dark ages, running off an Excel spreadsheet, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's why I'm so impressed with InTime. InTime is designed specifically for public safety agencies, from police and sheriff's offices to corrections, dispatch, and fire agencies. Their cloud-based system and their smartphone app allow officers to access the system from anywhere to sign up for overtime, submit vacation requests, and get updated on court subpoenas. Their system is incredibly easy to use and only takes a few minutes, not hours, to understand and begin using. Major agencies like the Anaheim Police Department, Pittsburgh Police, Passaic County Sheriff's Office, CAL FIRE, and many others trust InTime to save them time and money. If you're interested in spending less time on scheduling, eliminating redundant and expensive overtime, increasing your compliance with subpoenas, and reducing the stress and fatigue on your employees, please, I beg of you, go to intime.com/the squad room to learn more about their system. Brandon Griffith, welcome to the Squad Room. Thanks for being here, man.
Hey, good morning, Gary. Thank you for having me, brother.
We have been trying to have this conversation for quite some time. And life events happen as they always do for us. But I'm glad that we're actually finally here. Not quite face to face, but face to face as much as we get on the internet these days. I thought I don't get to ask this question of most guests, so I'm just going to jump right into like the big question. I'm going to start probably in the middle of your story rather than at the beginning. You know, sometimes you have guests come on and say, "Tell me your story," but with you, I don't get to ask this question very often, so I'm going to start with this. What's it like to die?
Oh man, you're going to go right into the heart of it, huh? All right. Well, it's definitely a fascinating subject, and I've been fortunate to have experienced it, but I've also worked with a lot of near-death doctors that research this around the world, and there's a lot of controversy over some of it. Some people say that, in the first 7 minutes, it's still possible for your brain to register neurons that are firing and break down chemicals like dimethyltryptamine and cortisol and norepinephrine and all this stuff. So some people think in those first 7 minutes, the stuff that people experience, I saw my life flash before my eyes, I saw the white light, I floated above the surgical table, I was above the accident scene, those kind of things, they kind of think that those could be dreams or those could be neurons firing. But after that 7 minutes of death, the first 7 minutes, there's a lot of research that says that it's not possible for your brain and your body to continue breaking those down without adequate blood flow. So most of the survivors that I've worked with around the world have all kind of experienced that, what happens after that 7 minutes. And I was dead for 16 and a half. And, it was definitely a surreal experience. And it's something that unless you've been there, it's really hard to describe, but it was the most calm, relaxing, peaceful, greatest feeling ever, man. There was no stress. There was no fear. Some people attribute it to like a dreamlike state, but I was at a different plane of existence, man. And I remember distinctly looking around, trying to figure out what was going on. I remember going, where in the hell am I? I remember just this overwhelming like presence next to me. And I couldn't tell you if this was, family member, God, guardian angel. I don't know, but there was something
Right.
with me right here. And it was this overwhelming calming. And I started to have this conversation, and it was more like, it wasn't like you and I are speaking right now. I don't want to call it ESP because it was more feelings and intuition. But in this conversation, I remember, being told what was going on. And I remember having this conversation about earning my second chance. And I remember just feeling like I was being embraced, like I was being hugged this entire time. And the longer I'm there, the more I'm starting to see the shapes, the silhouettes, the stuff. Like, when you go into a dark room in an op and, your cone vision hasn't developed yet, you start to see shapes and silhouettes around things. Imagine that. Like, the longer you're there, I think, like, I don't know, what do you want to call it? If you look at your brain as an antenna, or if you're on the other side, it takes a while for your soul or whatever to become akin to the other side. It takes a while for it to actually tune into things. So I've talked to some survivors that went from that experience to see family members, to go on to loved ones, but it was an overwhelming peace and relaxation until I was shocked back. And when it was like someone flipped the light switch and I was back in my body. And that surreal and amazing feeling was gone. That pain was back. The worry, the stress, everything, the weight of the world came back onto me. And my chest had been caved in from all the CPR. I'd been shocked. I could taste blood on my mouth from where they dropped the OPA in. My leg had been drilled through for the IO drill. My hands and legs hadn't been oxygenated properly for like 16 and a half minutes. So it just felt like daggers everywhere. But worst of all was my head. I mean, I felt like someone was just taking a sledgehammer to the top of every heartbeat. I got that white flash and the pounding headache. And I remember kind of sitting up, pushing the firefighters off me, and my wife, grabs me by my face and says, "Don't leave me." I said I wouldn't before I collapsed back onto the gurney. And I remember every intimate detail of going down, of my death, what happened on the other side, and coming back. But the next 5 days in the hospital while recovering are an absolute blur. My brain was just recovering from hypoxia, and probably because when I put my head through the wall, I got a little damage there too. But hopefully that answered your question a little bit. But it's definitely taken away any kind of fear of death or anything. But it's got to be your time.
Well, it's a fantastic description of it, and I'm really, you're not the first person I've had on who's experienced something similar, but who's also said that they were in some way, conscious isn't the right word, but aware of what was happening during the time that they were clinically dead, or without blood flow to the brain. You were 26 when you had this heart attack, so.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. I did not have a heart attack. So there's a lot of stigmas around it, and a lot of people mislabel it. As soon as you say heart or cardiac, people automatically assume heart attack. They think of the old man clutching his chest, falling down. So heart disease is a blanket term, and it overcompasses everything from, cardiac arrest to heart attacks to stroke to heart failure. But everyone wants to always label it as a heart attack. A heart attack is a plumbing issue where you've got a blockage to a part of the heart, right? Okay. I had a cardiac arrest, which is an electrical issue. Imagine you plug in the Christmas tree and it shorts out on you. That's electrical. All those stories like in the NFL and the soccer league, all these famous athletes that you see just collapsing on the field, those are electrical malfunctions. It's not a plumbing issue. Heart attacks are 95% survivable. It's just like there's a blockage and they have trouble breathing and there's pain, they get sweaty, different thing.
So say it again, just to be real clear, because I didn't know the difference here. What is it that you had?
I had what's called a cardiac arrest. And yes, I was 26 years old. I just made my SWAT team, was in phenomenal shape. There was no signs, there was no symptoms. And just like everybody else, I mean, it can happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. And we lose approximately 27,000 kids under the age of 18 per year from cardiac arrest and these electrical malfunctions.
And I know you're a deputy sheriff, not a medical doctor, but you know more about this, and you're the expert, and this is why we're having you on. When we say I know you said the heart attack is a plumbing issue, cardiac is an electrical issue. What's Can you share with me, just because I don't know, and I spend way too much time obsessing about the fact that cops have heart attacks, or maybe it's cardiac events so early in their careers, and maybe I've been mislabeling these all this time. But again, what's the difference? Plumbing to electrical, I get that, but cardiac, I think for most of us, sounds like the same, like a synonym for heart.
So from the time you're in the womb until the day you die, your heart sends electrical impulses that cause the four chambers of your heart to beat in the right sequence. One misfire is all it takes for it to go into this quivering state called ventricular fibrillation, or it starts beating so fast that there's no blood being pumped to the rest of the body. It's just not filling up enough to pump it back out, and that's called ventricular tachycardia. Those are your two shockable rhythms. Like, it's not like TV where somebody dies and they flatline and it goes doo. You're not restarting a dead battery. The heart's in this quivering motion, and it needs to be shocked by that AED to go back to a normal rhythm, right? So those are your typical electrical issues. Now, heart disease is the blanket term that covers all of the heart conditions. So a heart attack is when you have a blockage in like a coronary artery, and that causes the death of a part of your heart tissue. And those are 95% survivable. Heart attacks do turn into cardiac arrest, what actually kills the patients, the widowmakers and whatnot, when they get that full blockages and the heart starts going into the cardiac arrest. There's also strokes. There's also cardiomyopathies. There's heart failure. I mean, we can talk about that kind of stuff all day, but yes, heart disease is the number one cause of death for first responders, and people don't talk about it. We talk about our suicides. We talk about substance abuse. We talk about motor vehicle accidents and violent assaults. But heart disease is the number one cause of death for first responders. And all those stories you hear about guys retiring and dying within 5 to 10 years, it's their hearts catching up with the marathon of the careers we have. Overactive endocrine systems, poor sleep, caffeine addiction, substance abuse, the constant stress, all those things that take a toll on our heart, our bodies start catching up. And yes, all those stories you see, these cops in the middle of foot pursuits dropping or in training having complications, most of those are going to be electrical. But some of them also have congenital issues, and there's a lot that plagues our community when it comes to heart disease.
And so I appreciate all the descriptions too, because I think it is important to understand the differences and realize that it's not, obviously diet and exercise are a huge component of this, but there are also some things that, just because we're humans, are beyond our control. And if our heart decides to go into an electrical state that's maladaptive, then we have to be aware of those things. What was your, were you at work or were you off duty when this all happened?
No, my wife makes fun of me. I've been shot at. I've been in knife
Mine
fights.
Too.
I've been in water rescues where I got trapped under a vehicle and burning buildings, and I died at home reading a book. Like, you can't make it up, man. Like, I was not this house. It was in the former house, but I was seriously sitting there reading a book. She was on a computer doing some work. No stress, nothing. Like I said, I just made my SWAT team 2 weeks earlier. All is good. I stood up. I said, "Hey, I'm gonna take the dog out to the bathroom." I took 2 steps towards my den door, and it was just like, you ever have someone jump out and scare you? When your heart like skips that beat? Well, imagine that skip beat, but you're unable to recover from it. So in that moment, my heart had this thing, and I collapsed in literally a second and a half. But for me, I experienced time distortion. Anybody who's been through critical stress incidents on the streets knows that weird things happen to the body under that kind of extreme stress. You get time distortion, you get auditory exclusion, you get, tunnel vision. I was experiencing time distortion, so everything just slowed way down. And I remember just bearing down, and I remember my jugular vein sticking out. And I remember just going, something's not right, and I can't breathe. And I'm sitting there going, all right, try to combat breathe, try to do something to get out of this. But turns out when you're in cardiac arrest, there's no blood being pumped to your lungs. So they physically cannot expand with oxygen. So I started doing what's called agonal breathing, where I'm basically convulsing, trying to force myself to breathe, but my lungs, just without blood flow, they can't pump open. So I'm going trying to force myself to breathe. And that's when my wife turns around from her chair, sees my face is the darkest purple she'd ever seen, and sees me struggling to breathe, all my veins sticking out. I collapse backwards into my bookshelf as she's calling 911. She puts the phone on speaker to drop it. She tries to brace me as I'm falling forward. Now I'm 6'4". She's about 5'3", so I topple right over her and I slam my head right through the wall. And I land on my hands and my knees and I'm looking out in my hallway and I'm starting to experience tunnel vision, but it's nothing like I've experienced in the field. You know when your heart rate gets jacked up on a critical scene and it's kind of hard to focus, almost like you're looking through a coffee straw sometimes and you got to widen your view. It wasn't like that. My vision was like this dark, dark purplish, almost black, and it was fluttering out. Like it was literally just minimizing. Like I could see the shapes and silhouettes of things starting to dissipate, almost like someone was inking it in. And in that moment, I remember just being like, this is it. Like that feeling of helplessness, knowing that I'm a cop, I'm used to be an EMT. I've saved I don't know how many lives. I don't know how many times I've done CPR at this point. But in this moment, there is absolutely nothing I can do to save my own life. Can't say goodbye to my wife. I can't tell her I love her. I can't do anything but collapse. And at that moment, I dropped dead. So that's when she, my absolute hero, she was amazing. She rolled me on my back. She started doing CPR. I mean, she even had the presence of mind to put my feet up on the couch in her den. Now, I can't get ER docs to think like that because basically she was trying to have gravity force the oxygenated blood that was already in my legs down to my core. And she was just did a phenomenal job. She did CPR me until the first officer arrived at about the 4.5 minute mark. So she had to stop working on me, go unlock the door, let the dog pull the dog back. The officer was not equipped with an AED, but he did a phenomenal job doing hands-only CPR. He jumped on my chest and worked on me until about the 9.5 minute mark when fire and EMS arrived. They show up, pull my body in the living room where they got more room to work. You know, they start working on me. They have to drop an OPA. They IO me. They shock me multiple times. But all in all, I was dead for 16.5 minutes before they were able to get a pulse back.
You touched on why I think this is such an important issue, and why this can't just be a fire EMS issue when it comes to us and how we come at our jobs, because it's similar to me to we now carry at my agency, we now carry Narcan, and a lot of agencies do, right? We have for years. We were one of the first in this state to do it, and there's some pushback to it, and I imagine there's pushback you've heard on the AED front too. We've carried AEDs since before I was here, so at least 19, 20 years at my agency, we've carried AEDs, but that was rather unique. And it's similar to the Narcan, and I'll compare. The point I'm trying to make for people is we can't, with our obligations, but also with our skills and our ability to be mobile and fast. How many times has anybody who's listening to this beat fire and medics to the scene? Almost all the time, right?
90% of the time.
90% of the time. There you go. And so we have an ability, an opportunity, and an obligation to look at how we can be part of this solution, right? And I'm curious if the officer that arrived, do you work, or was it from your agency, or was it from a different agency?
He was from a different agency, and just a phenomenal guy. And he's given me permission to share this. A couple of years later, he actually suffered a medical incident. He had a heart attack in the station right after briefing and collapsed. He coded on the way to the hospital and was saved, and he ended up medically retiring. But having been a part of it, we've talked about this a lot. Yeah, cops are on scene 90% of the time first. We can make the biggest impact in out of hospital survival, but unfortunately, the medical community, the cardiac community don't know how to work with us. And most of the time, the police department doesn't know what we need to do to optimize this. So that's one of the reasons why we'll get into that when we talk about starting the nonprofit. But seeing the potential for law enforcement is insane, but you have these agencies that don't have the proper dispatch protocols for it. You got an officer across the street on a traffic stop or sitting in a parking lot doing a report, and as soon as someone calls 911, this officer's across the street from someone having a cardiac arrest. It goes 911, what's your emergency? It goes to fire and EMS, and then maybe they'll kick it back over to have the police officer roll that way when he could have made the biggest impact. Instead of co-dispatching or doing the closest responder dispatch protocols, I don't care if it's your chief of police, citizen on patrol, anybody who can get in there and make a difference. These agencies, sometimes you have other agencies that as soon as it's labeled as a fire medical call, police don't go at all. So, I mean, how are you utilizing those tools? I mean, if you guys aren't using your AEDs constantly for your agency, you might want to look at the way they're field deployed, and you also might want to look at the way you're being dispatched, because we're going to be out there all the time, especially in larger populated areas. We have these guys going almost daily, multiple times a week. People are going into cardiac arrest and need CPR and intervention, and our officers can make the biggest differences on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into the your foundation and your mission there in just a second. I'm uh, I'm curious about what your experience with that process was at the time of your event. You know, where was your agency, or where was you're in Arizona? Where was the kind of the state uh, bright line or median for how we responded to these events?
So I was very fortunate. My organization was very forward thinking, and we did a phenomenal job of outfitting our guys with the tools and equipment we needed. So I had AEDs on my patrol vehicle when I started, when I was on FTO. It was in my vehicles. We used them constantly, and I thought that was the norm around the country. I didn't realize only about 20% of agencies across the country have AEDs in their patrol cars. So I kind of thought it was norm, and I was really surprised the officer that responded to me didn't have an AED at the time and could have prevented further brain damage and complications. So it wasn't until after I got back to work where I realized how often we were on scene first. I mean, at the time I worked for a municipal agency that had 680 square miles. So there was times where we're on scene 20, 30 minutes before fire and EMS in these rural areas. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was packing bullet holes. I was putting tourniquets on. We were using Narcan. We were doing rescue breaths. We were pulling kids out of pools. Like, we were constantly doing medical interventions and working on cases with excited delirium and all these incidents. But I'm sitting there going, something's wrong here. We get the worst training when it comes to first aid and medical stuff. When it comes to resuscitation, we get the leftover. We get something every 1 to 5 years. Some firefighter comes in, checks a box. You watch a PowerPoint. No one cares about it. You take all of, a minute and a half on a mannequin, and they go, hey, you're certified. We don't take it seriously, and most guys end up questioning their skills. You talk to most people, when that mom hands you that blue baby and says save them, officers go, oh, and if they freeze for a second, they're like, am I doing two fingers? Is it one hand? How's the depth? Am I doing back slaps? No, wait, that's choking. You got guys that are not confident in that ability when that mom hands you that blue baby, and we don't want them second guessing that. So I realized how underutilized and how undertrained and prepared law enforcement really was. So it kind of started as a side gig. I started working to help implement law enforcement resuscitation programs. I started looking at our program. How do we fix some of the current complications we're having? How do I help agencies like our next door agency who said, hey, man, I'm sorry to hear about your cardiac arrest. One of my buddies had just become assistant chief, and he said, we're interested in doing AEDs in our organization. Do you have any suggestions? So I had to kind of go in there. I started calling AED manufacturers. And at the time, 10 years ago, law enforcement wasn't considered a market. They lumped law enforcement in with PetSmart and Cintas and all these other places that just put the AED on the wall and hope it doesn't get used for the next 5 to 10 years. But there was no program. I said, hey, who's your law enforcement reps? Who actually goes in and sells to cops? So cops don't buy AEDs. They put one in their station and one on the wall, and that's it. And they never maintain them. Okay, well, so you start looking at it, and I realized the cardiac industry had been trying to get cops to carry AEDs since the 90s unsuccessfully. Nobody knows what to do with us because we're not protected by Good Samaritan laws. We're not bystanders. We're required first responders, but we don't have the same protocols and training levels as the fire and EMS counterparts that work directly with medical direction. We're smack dab in the middle, and no one knows what to do with us. So we started creating these programs. We had to do it from scratch. We had to say, okay, what do the policies look like? We had to bring in chiefs of police and policy writers. What would a good dispatch system look like for this? And we had to bring in dispatch managers. All right, how do we actually deploy these? What's the sustainability? How do we cost and how do we budget for these things, whether it be by grants or whether it be by drug funds or corporations, or how do we actually fund these programs to make them successful? But the biggest thing that I saw a huge disconnect in was training. Our training was horrible, and most of it was designed for civilians. That all, you call 911, you get an AED, and it's very different for us. And I've shared this a lot. When you and I are on scene working on an overdose patient, we narc him, he doesn't wake up, and I'm doing CPR on him one-handed, telling the fire department which house we're at because they can't see the numbers, and I got his uncle in the room with a felony warrant. Am I doing the most accurate CPR? Have I been trained for that scenario? No, you adapt and you go with it. You're probably doing shit CPR, and no, you don't have the tools you need. You're just trying to do your best, and it sucks sitting there pushing away in someone's chest, going, "When is the fire department going to get here?" I don't have the tools and requirements and things that I need, and I hated cops being put in that situation literally on a daily basis. We lose 697,000 Americans per year to heart disease. We had 1,100 fatal police shootings last year, but how much time did we spend? Folks, not enough, but I mean, we spend so much time on the range, we spend so much time in simulators, we do force on force training. Why don't we take that kind of training methodology towards resuscitation where we can make the biggest difference and uphold our most sacred honor, which is the preservation of life. So we
Mm.
had to kind of create these custom training programs that implement reality-based training program, muscle memory development, stress inoculation, and we created the advanced law enforcement resuscitation training courses.
And so this is with your foundation, Griffith Blue Heart, and I'm very what's the right word? I'm not usually at a loss for words, but I just, you're still a young guy. This was not that long ago, and you've got a family and you've got a career, and to point out too that you came back to work. You didn't medically retire out of this.
It wasn't easy. I'll tell you that too.
And I want to ask about that, but to add to from my perspective, or for, like, I think my initial reaction would be after an event like that would be to lay off anything that would be remotely stressful, that might add something to my life, that might add a responsibility. But here you are, you came back to work and you started the nonprofit, which goes out and teaches uh, agencies about these events and then equips them with the equipment they need. Uh, Share with us, yeah, what was it like coming back to work after something so major, and then the decisions to really make this into a thing? Because in preparation for our conversation today, I was thinking about you touched on it a bit about Damar Hamlin, I think it's his name, the football player who everybody saw drop into a cardiac arrest. You told me on the field on national TV, right? And he just announced a couple days ago, from when we were recording this, that he was cleared to come back to full full duty for a football player. He's been cleared for football, and that he's been practicing and working out and all those things. And I thought, a guy like that, I'd never heard his name. I don't follow football, much less I think the Bills. I don't even know what team he's on. But lots of people do, and lots of people are very impassioned about that team and about him as a player. Everybody saw this on the field. It was kind of shocking to the conscious beliefs of the entire nation. They got to see something that we see all the time, which is someone who is a very fit and capable person just drop dead. And as a result of that, he had tons of support. He's got tons of fans. He's certainly got tons of money that he can throw at this problem. He's got an NFL team with the best doctors available in that area. And as individual officers, we don't have really any of that, right? We are very much left to those things on our own, and to be our own advocate, and to make our own path. So I'm comparing the two experiences, yours to him, because they seem to be quite similar, but with much different setups and end results. Can you share with us what that process was like of deciding to come back to work?
Get ready, man. We're going to unpack a lot right now. So, yeah,
That's why this podcast exists.
So 26 years old, as soon as somebody goes down, I mean, what's your first thought process? Do you think I'm coming back to work?
No.
That's how everyone labeled it. Everyone tried to make that decision for me. Here, I literally had just made my SWAT team. I'm a DT instructor. I was an FTO. Everything was going in the right direction. I was finally going to be an operator. In a heartbeat, that changed. In a literal heartbeat, my whole life changed. All of a sudden, I lost my spot on my team. I'm told there's no way you can come back to work. We're putting this medical device in your chest. You have to start this medication regimen. And I was like, what the? Literally yesterday, I was just fine. Now all of a sudden, I've got a medical device in my chest, and you're telling me I can't work? And how many cops truly prepare for that moment? How many of us are prepared? I mean, we all think about, yeah, we all know every day we put the uniform on, I could get shot, I could get stabbed, I can get in a motor vehicle accident today. Something bad could happen to me, right? But how many of us realistically have mentally prepared for, what if I can't put that uniform on tomorrow? What if I can't go back to work? What if something else prohibits me from doing so? What's my backup plan? Do I have enough funds to sustain myself for an extended period of time if I have a medical incident and have to pay hospital bills? Do I have the right insurance? Am I mentally equipped for this? Is my family prepared for this? How am I going to pay for all this? How many guys actually look at those and start planning ahead of time, putting aside financial funds, talking to people, having a backup plan if you can't go into work tomorrow? And that's what I was literally faced with. I thought I was going to do my 20 and then look at other careers. I had no thought process at 26 years old of not being able to go back to work the following day. So my biggest thing was, I'm going back to work. And literally, my command staff's like, "Oh, pump the brakes, man. We don't even know if you can go back to work with state, with department regulations and risk management. We don't know if we can even authorize you to." And I was like, "Well, who the hell are you to tell me what I can and can't do? You don't know what I'm capable of." And I'm sitting there going through all these tests. They put my heart through everything from stress tests to MRIs to ultrasounds. They broke my blood down to chromosomic levels, and guess what they found?
What?
Nothing. There's nothing wrong with my heart. There was no diagnosis. And it was literally an electrical malfunction that can happen to anyone, anytime, anywhere. How many guys are getting checked in their head for brain aneurysms? You could drop right now in the middle of this conversation from a brain aneurysm, right? I had a cardiac arrest. So it was like someone flipped a switch. I got shocked. There's no diagnosis. There's nothing wrong with my heart. It's physically very healthy. There's no electrical issues. There's no plumbing issues. And why can't I go back to work? They put this device in my chest as a precaution. It's not like it's a pacemaker. It doesn't keep my heart functioning. It sits dormant in there in case I need it. And if I ever go into cardiac arrest again, it shocks me. And I have it set to the lowest setting, so it should shock me while I'm conscious. It's going to hurt, but I didn't want to collapse while I was driving a car or in front of a suspect. And I'm on medication to prevent that. But you got these other officers that are ticking time bombs that have got clogged arteries, that have got stroke, that are pre-stroke, that are diabetic. You got all these other guys, and they're allowed to go back to the field. And we know they're going to drop at any moment. But you're telling me a young, fit 26-year-old had a medical complication can't go back because you got a device put in your chest. So all of a sudden I have this emotional roller coaster going, right? Because all of a sudden my whole life changes. I'm already dealing with dying and coming back to life. My wife went through something extremely traumatic, watching me dead on the floor for 16 and a half minutes. I was pretty insensitive to her needs at that time as well. Now I'm also facing, how am I going to pay for this? Like, all these things were compounding, and all of a sudden, like, there's no game plan. I started looking out to other cops that maybe returned. There was nobody I could find. Start reaching out to cardiac arrest groups. There's nothing. Like, you don't get a brochure. You don't get like a breakdown or a briefing. They slap you on the back and say, "Hey, you're one of the lucky ones. Get out there." And you're kicked out of the hospital. I mean, how terrifying is that? Like, is this going to happen again? We don't know. What affects my defibrillator? Well, here's a booklet. Start reading about it. Like, your brain, what are the medication side effects? What are the long-term effects? What is my mental health going to look like for the next year or two or 5 years? There's no playbook. And all the survivor groups I found were like, "Do you want to come share your story and go speak at a medical conference?" No, I don't want to be a show pony. I want to know, what are my rights? How do I get back to work? Am I protected by ADA? What does OSHA say? What about workers' compensation? All the stuff that I was trying to find the answers for did not exist. And now my command staff, except for Chief Mark Mann, I absolutely love him, and he had my back from the second I collapsed. The rest of my command staff labeled me as damaged goods, and they were like, "Get him the hell out of here. Like, there's no way he's going back to work." And they sat down, they were talking to me and my wife about changing careers, and maybe they could find a civilian position for me in the police department. And I'm like, "No, I'm coming back to work." And that passion turned to anger, and I was like, I'm not taking no for an answer. So I was like, all right, how do I get from here to there? How do I get back to doing my job? So I had to bring in medical researchers. I had to go through tests. I had to figure out, what is it like? Because some of the questions they were asking, well, what happens if you get tased? Is your radio going to interfere with your medical device? What about this? That other survivors didn't have the answers to. And of course, when you call up, Taser, or you call up the people that make your device, it's like, "Hey, what happens if I get tased?" We don't recommend it. Shit, that's not an answer. Like, what do you mean you don't recommend it? Like, what actually happens? I need to know for myself. I said, I'm an FTO. I train brand new scared bunnies that are straight out of the academy that have never been punched in the face before. As soon as we get in an altercation, the first thing they go for is their taser. If they miss and shoot me, I need to know I'm not going to die. I need to know that I'm not going to be out of the fight for the next 10 minutes. What happens? And I couldn't get an answer. And I kept getting put off to liability stuff. All of a sudden, I call my medic. I'm like, "Hey, bring your bag over. I'm taking a ride." So I tased myself. And I went through the testing, and I started to figure out, does this thing interfere with my device? How close can I have my body camera to this thing? I had to go through all these testings, and I had to go back to risk management. And I brought in the researchers to say, he's safer than any officer out here. And I was successful. I returned back to work, and I'm one of the only, if not the only officers to return back to full active duty after a cardiac arrest with an implanted device in my chest. And I have been helping and mentoring other officers and firefighters in the U.S. and Canada who are fighting the same battles. As soon as they get labeled that way, they're like, "There's no way you can go back to work." I just helped my buddy who's a Canadian firefighter return back to full active duty. He's the first one in the country to do that. And too often we get cast aside. So that's a little taste of what that was like. But if you want me to dive into the cardiac arrest side of things and what it's like to be a cardiac arrest survivor and have to go through all that stuff, I can talk about that too.
Yeah, I do want to talk about it because I think it's important because it is one of the things that for me personally just weighs on me. And particularly after last year when my own mother experienced a widowmaker, survived, thankfully. But ever since then has been very much. I think I have just enough hypochondria and an access to WebMD that I am constantly aware of the possibilities out there. So I do want to get into that, but I want to ask first because you mentioned something about this what if it happens again, and you've got this regimen, this the medication and the device in your chest, but how do you deal with the ever present, or maybe it's not for you, but I would think for me it would be an ever present awareness that this has occurred and it could happen again at any time. Like, is there anything you use specifically to kind of manage what could be crushing anxiety for some people?
So I work with survivors around the world, and I work with survivors that have been saved by their devices multiple times, that have had multiple follow-up incidents, but they've also got diagnosed diseases, right? I don't have
Mm-hmm.
anything diagnosed in me, but I've had survivors that have been saved 20-something times by their device. And could you
Wow.
imagine what it's like? I compare it to being a rape victim. You've been through something traumatic, and oh, by the way, you're going to get raped again sometime in the next, 2 to 5 years. Just prepare for that. What do you mean? I'm gonna what? Like, how do you prepare to go through something that traumatic again? And I've had survivors that have collapsed and smashed their faces into granite countertops in front of their spouses. I've had ones that died multiple times that kept having misfires in front of their family members. They die, get shocked, wake up, collapse again, repeat over and over until they got into the hospital. I mean, could you imagine waking up dead, dying, waking up in front of you, looking your wife and your kid in the eyes, and then collapsing again and going through it over and over? Like, that's some seriously traumatic shit that most people don't think about. But I, I beat the odds. I'm one of the few that survived it. Cardiac arrest. If you look at only 1 out of 9 out of hospital survival, we're going to lose 600,000 something people this year to heart disease across the country, and 17 million across the globe. I know that 1,000 Americans today are going to have a cardiac arrest and not survive.
Wow.
Any one of them would gladly trade their places with me, right? So how do I earn this? Because I'm already on borrowed time. Am I going to sit here and am I going to wallow and am I going to worry about if it's going to happen again? Or am I going to appreciate the gift that I've been given? I've been given a second chance that other people haven't. And how am I going to earn today? And part of that conversation I had on the other side was to earn it. So literally at the end of each day, I got to look at myself and take a personal account of, was I a good enough father? Was I a good enough husband? Did I help someone today? Did I make a difference? And if I can't answer the yes to that, did I just waste the time that I've been given? So, I mean, could it happen? Yeah. Could you go outside and get in a car accident today? Could you get shot? Could you have an aneurysm? Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and wallow and worry about this. I've already been there and done that. I have no fear of death. If it happens and my device doesn't save me, I got to father and get and deliver both of my children. I'm raising them to the best of my ability. I got to help save lives. I got to implement life-saving programs. I'm not worried about the if it's going to happen again. None of us are getting out of here alive, right? So there's no point in sitting here worrying and wallowing on that. But being in the moment, being present, expressing gratitude, doing what you can to cherish the moments that you are given. There's not a day that goes by. I don't thank God for another day. Thank you for another moment. Thank you for this hug from my daughter. Like, all those things just kind of build up in me. So I don't have time to worry about if it's going to happen. If it does, it does, and we'll address it then. But like, right now I'm battling a personal issue with these medications they've had me on, and I am trying a trial to get off it for a while. And my family's paranoid; they all think I'm just going to drop dead on the floor. And it's like, for me, I'm not too worried about it. But selfishly, I haven't been considering their. I mean, my wife has got the most to object to it, right? She watched me dead on the floor. This is her story. She's the one that saved my life. She's the one that had to live through it. I was laying there, right? This is her story.
Right.
So when I try to make these decisions, I'm going to go off a medication for a while. It's like, you have to, as a survivor, you have to bring those around you into it, because it's not just you. It's not just up to you. It's your kids, your family. They're all a part of this decision as well. So I don't know. It's kind of a complicated thing, because you want to do what's right and you want to have that quality of life, because you don't want to have all these medication side effects compounding. But you also don't want to put your family through a traumatic incident. What if it doesn't work? What if your device doesn't save you? What if it happens while I'm in the pool? What happens if it happens when I'm in the shower and I bust my head open? I don't make it. There's so many what ifs, but I've never been one of those guys that's going to sit around and wallow and worry about it. If it happens, it happens. There's nothing I can do to control it, so why worry about it?
It's no secret that in the past few years, criminals and anti-police groups have gotten a lot more bold about challenging law enforcement officers. It's really scary because many of those groups have no problem showing up at an officer's house for protests or to try and intimidate the officer and their families. Even worse, it's easy for criminals to find your home address, and I actually have several partners and friends who have had violent felons show up at their front door after tracking them down on the internet. A lot of cops don't think about these things until they've been involved in a critical incident. New laws in many states require agencies to release the names of officers involved in shootings and uses of force, and it's not uncommon these days for cops to find the media at their front door the next morning. Don't wait until you're dealing with the aftermath of a critical incident to protect you and your family. Get it done today, and I highly recommend officerprivacy.com to help you wipe your name and your information from the top 50 people search sites on the web. Check out the special deal at officerprivacy.com/the squad room, where you'll get 2 free months of monitoring and data removal, plus a free cell phone privacy device when you sign up.
The gratitude piece of that, it's something we talk about a lot on this show, is, and for me, I think is, like, if I can tell people one thing to change their negative mindset, to improve their resilience, to do all the mental things that we need to do to survive a career, is to develop a gratitude practice, in whatever that looks like for that person. What were you like before your cardiac arrest in that area? Like, did you have this gratitude or mindfulness or anything like that, or was it really just that moment when you were on the other side where you had to kind of make that promise to implement that?
I'll be honest, it was a little bit opposite me. I had survivor's guilt. I mean, I have buried friends in the line of duty, and I consider better men to me. And I was given a second chance when they weren't, and that was something that weighed heavy on me. Why am I here when Mike's not here, when Rolando's not here, when Chris isn't here? Like, seeing all this kind of happen, it was harder for me to swallow that pill than to be out. Yeah, I was grateful, but I was also kind of like, why am I here when they're not? And that was something I still battle to this day. I still have a little bit of survivor's guilt, and I was told to earn it. I want to make sure that when I do finally succumb, that I can tell my maker I did everything I could to earn my second chance that I was given. And that's what, did I do enough? I remember more of that conversation as the years go on. And it's like, am I doing what I'm supposed to do? Am I fulfilling that? And that weighs more on me than that. But before this, I was very grateful. And I had seen friends not go home at the end of their shift. And I had buried too many friends under the stars and stripes. And it's a very different experience. So I was always grateful. And obviously this just continued to compound that and make me even more grateful. But what really changed my mindset, we're all public servants. We're all used to helping people, but getting involved in the nonprofit side and helping others is what really helped my mental health. Being able to, because afterwards, one of the cardiac arrest researchers that helped me get my job back was like, "Hey, I'm having this conference. I want you to come speak at." I'm like, "Hell no, I'm not going to be a poster boy. You don't want me to speak. I'm a dumb street cop. I'm gonna be dropping f-bombs. Like, you don't want me anywhere near the stage." I said, "I just want to go back to work. I want to get back on my SWAT team. I want to keep my head down." I was already facing all these stigmas. All these guys were treating me like I was some fragile cardiac patient. I had to out fight just to prove that I wasn't going to grab my chest and keel over. Everyone's like, "Can you do this with your heart condition?" So the last thing I wanted to do was take on another cause or be a poster pony and go out there and raise money and all this. So I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to go back to living my life and move on. But at this event, I ended up hearing another survivor speak, and I was moved by it. I was like, you know what, I can do that. So I got up on stage and I talked a little bit. And afterwards, this young girl and her parents came up to me and gave me a big hug. And she says, I've got this genetic defect in my heart. Insurance won't cover a defibrillator to an implanted device. I'm basically waiting for the day I die. Can I talk to you about what you experienced? I'm like, well, of course. So I sat down and I talked to her and her parents about it. And it was like this weight was lifted off of her. And, there was tears in her eyes. And I really saw that something I had been through had made a big difference on somebody else. And I was like, all right, maybe there is something to this. And I started doing a couple more events. And I started speaking with other survivors. And I started realizing that there was an elephant in the room everywhere we were going, that survivors weren't getting support. We were used to show ponies. Go tell your story, go make people feel good, go on stage. You got 5-10 minutes, then we'll bring in the researchers to talk about the other stuff, and then people they'll write us checks. Was any of the money going to the survivors, their family members, their causes? No, it was go make people feel good and then make it their travel covered. But nobody was helping us with the mental health toll, with the medication side effects, with the legal side of it, with the, survivors can't get health insurance. You've got the neurological issues, post survival, from hypoxia to brain damage to all these other things that survivors have to live with constantly. There was no support. There was no one out there. So being able to go back and give back and start doing panel discussions on the unspoken realities of survivorship, and on hosting webinars and bringing in experts to talk about these very things has been incredibly rewarding and fulfilling to me. And helping other people and seeing that I have it really well compared to what some other survivors that have permanent neurological damage and can never go back to work, that, lost their legs from ECMO gone wrong, like all these other things that happen to other survivors that I've been fortunate to have been given a second chance for. I don't want to take that for granted. So that that really helped me in a lot of ways, and expressing gratitude and changing myself, but lifting up others and helping people out was a huge driving force to my mental health.
Mm. We really are at our best when we're serving others, right? I mean, that's we all have a servant's heart anyway, but I think you can expand that to just us as humans as well.
Man, there's nothing like it when you get that phone call from another cop that says, "Hey, man, I just listened to this podcast with you in it. Me and my family went and got screened. Turns out my kid's got cardiomyopathy. You might have saved my son's life." Or, "Hey, it turns out that I was this close to having a widowmaker. Thank you." Like, when they start taking us seriously, and you write an article or you do something like that, and people take the time to actually implement some of the changes, and you get those phone calls, or, "Hey, man, I just went out and did CPR. I used the AED you donated. We just saved a life." Or, "We just slapped a tourniquet on somebody. We just used Narcan." All the programs that we've implemented out there, it becomes a force multiplier. And when we're saving dozens and dozens of lives at a time, and you're getting all these phone calls, or you're quadrupling survival, like, how does that not lift your spirits up and go, you know what, now all these other people are going to have second chance. They're going to be able to give birth and hold their kid for the first time, walk their daughter down the aisle. They're going to be able to graduate. They're going to be able to start the careers they were passionate about. And being able to be there for them, how could you not feel rewarded and have a better mental health state after that?
Right. Yeah. It's amazing what you're doing. And you've formalized going from reluctantly being on stage to to the founder and CEO of Griffith Blue Heart, which is your own nonprofit organization. Share with us the mission of the organization. You've touched on it here and there, but what are the things that you can do for agencies that are trying to bring themselves into this new paradigm of law enforcement?
So what we do is we prepare, train, and equip law enforcement for time-sensitive medical emergencies. And when I say that, I'm talking about your cardiac arrests, your bleeding controls, your overdoses, your drownings, excited deliriums, all the stuff your officers are already responding to. We're going to give them high-performance training, and we're going to implement a system to support that. So we work directly with command staff members, and we partner with agencies, and we say, all right, this is what we're going to do for you. We will help you write policies. We will help you implement dispatch protocols. We're going to help you find funding for this, whether we do it through a grant, through internal funding, through corporate sponsors or drug monies, or whatever the case may be. We're going to help you guys not only fund it, but we're going to look at sustainability. How many projected times are you going to use these devices? How many consumables are you going to go through? How long is it, and how much is it going to cost over the next 5 years, 10 years? We're going to look at the whole program as a whole. We're going to help you guys train your officers the right way. We're going to also talk to them about their health, because we're at the highest risk. Most cops are ticking time bombs and don't take it seriously. Your physical is not enough. Getting in and getting a quick EKG is not enough for your health. Getting your lipid panels, getting your MRIs, your stress tests, getting full cardiac workups is what's going to save guys' lives. And now, at my agency in Pinal County, Heart Fit for Duty comes out, and Sigma, all these other organizations are out there that have mobile heart screens that will come and check your officers' hearts. We partner with a lot of organizations, but we also want to help not just save lives in the community that we serve, but we also want to protect our officers, because most of the time we're at the highest risk, and we also don't prepare our families enough. I was fortunate. My wife had just been accepted to medical school, and we were EMTs together, so she knew exactly what to do and saved my life. But how many people, how many spouses of cops and firefighters are competent? And most of the time they go, if anything happens, my husband will take care of it, or my wife will take care of it. They're trained. But what happens when we're the ones that go down? Or when your 14-year-old daughter collapses in your living room? Do you have an AED at home? Are you prepared? Most cops don't, and most people don't think about those realities of actually having an AED in the home. We already do the what if game. What happens if we're at, Walmart and someone starts cranking off shots? What do you do? What do you tell the 911 dispatcher? We play the what if games with our family for that, but how likely is that scenario to actually transpire to you? But Heart disease affects 1 in 4 regular Americans, and we're at a 70 times higher risk for the first responder community. How likely are we to experience something like that? Are we playing the what if games with our kids? Are we outfitting them with medical equipment? Do we prepare them? And that's something that is not taken seriously enough. We don't promote good heart health. We don't promote health and wellness enough. We don't even talk about heart disease in the communities. It's very rare you hear anything about heart disease and how much it plagues our community.
That's very true. It's the you've touched on. It is going to kill more cops this year than anything else, and we all know, anyone who's been in this job any amount of time knows the guy that retires and within a year or 2 years codes out, and it is that drip of stress over years and years and years of your career, and some of the maladaptions that we sometimes take on. One of the questions I have on that aspect is, we talk about going and getting a workup, but like that itself can be overwhelming. Like lipid panels by themselves are confusing as hell to most people. Stress tests sound stressful. They are. But what are the things and I know you're not a doctor, so you're not prescribing these things, but what are the things you suggest people go do when they are looking at, well, what test do I need to do?
It's a lifestyle thing, right? So it's not just go get your test. Yeah, go to your doctor, ask to go see a cardiologist and say, I want a full workup. It's their job to put you through the tests, the ultrasounds, the MRIs, to actually check you out and give you a report. They read that stuff. You don't have to worry about reading your lipid panel. They're going to tell you, hey, this is high, take this medication, lose some weight, do whatever it is you need to do to get taken care of. That's what they're there for. But there's a lot of other things that we can do to help ourselves. And number one, it sounds simple, but get good sleep. We have a sleep epidemic when it comes to law enforcement. We have the crappiest sleep. All shift long, that you get these cortisol dumps and dopamine dumps and norepinephrine dumps. Our endocrine systems are in overdrive, so our glands are fatigued. Average citizen sees 3 to 8 critical stress incidents in their lifetime. There was a study that was done through, I think, IACP that said that a 20-year officer sees 700 to 900 critical stress incidents through it. But think about it. Every time you do a traffic stop, every time someone goes to reach for their wallet too fast, you're getting doses of epinephrine or adrenaline, right? These things build up in your body, and if you don't work out properly and you're not getting good sleep properly, you don't burn them off. You get the shakes, you get the headaches, you get the fatigue, you get the back pain, you get all the other stuff that comes along with it. Are guys taking the time to work out at the end of their shift to work off those chemicals? No. Are we taking the time to get really good REM sleep so our body can burn those off and replenish our glands? Are we preparing ourselves for that? Are we staying fit? Are we staying limber? No, we're driving around bored out of our minds for a couple hours, and all of a sudden we're in a foot pursuit and we're in a fight for our life. We're not meant to work in extremes like that, extreme heat, extreme cold. And let's face it, the stress of the job, it's not the stress that we're responding to in the field, it's the stress of the administrations and all the other BS that comes with it, the political nightmares and all the other stuff that just compound on cops. So these things all take huge tolls on our hearts. So getting good sleep, energy drinks. I can't tell guys this enough. Energy drinks are about one of the worst things you can do for your body. You got these guys, we all know them, that come into shift and crack open one bang after the next, or Monster or Rockstar, throughout their entire shifts. It causes atrial fibrillations. It rewires the conductivity in your heart. And those are just in short-term studies. The long-term studies aren't even out yet. Quit drinking that shit. It's killing you. We all know smoking's bad for you. We all know dip is bad for you, but guys are still doing dip. Guys are still out there smoking and doing cigars all the time. There's simple things that can actually make huge impacts on your health. You keeping your body weight down, eating healthy. It's okay to take part and grab a slice of pizza or donut at a training here and there, but long-term consistency, packing your lunch, eating better, not stuffing your face at the gas station or go hitting the drive-thru real quick because you're hurried. Those things can make huge differences on officers' health over the marathon of a career we have.
Back to the training, and I appreciate that. Back to the training you do for agencies now. There's obviously a wide spectrum of agencies that have been very progressive in this. There's agencies that are decades behind. What are some of the frustrations you deal with when you're dealing with administrators, executive staff who might be living in the dark ages? What are the beliefs that you kind of have to overcome there?
You'll see it. We got guys that came up at a different time that are in charge of agencies now, that back in the day saying, hey, tell fire to hurry up. That was their medical response. That really was it. They weren't going hands on, and it's a different time. It's a different age nowadays. Are you kidding me? Nowadays, with body cameras, if your officers are sitting there saying, "Hey, tell fire to hurry up and stand there while someone's bleeding out or not doing CPR on somebody," you're getting sued. Agencies are getting sued around the country for doing exactly that. And you will still have some command staff members say, "I tell my guys to wait for fire. That's what their job was. If I wanted to be a firefighter, I would have signed a different application." You hear all this crap, and it's like, great, you're opening up yourself and your agency to vicarious liability. Congratulations. And starting to get them to realize that this is a communal response. We are on scene. We're already doing this. If you look at the numbers, and that's why when we go in there and show them their numbers, you say, this is how many people died in your community last year. Here's your response time versus your fire and EMS response time. Here's your projected impact on survival. And they're like, you're telling me that next year I could save 100 people in my jurisdiction? Yeah, I really am. And also, this is what you can do for your officers. Do you want to pay out a widow benefits, or would you rather take the time to actually do a heart screening and save all these guys' lives? Oh, that's true. So it's about speaking command staff's language, letting them know that this is a new age, this is a new time. And you still have some guys that want, oh, it's too much of a liability. No, it's not. There's no liability for you having AEDs. You're at liability when you're training them on it and not outfitting them with it. When they're going on scene and they don't have it. There's so many times we are on scenes where it's not safe for fire and EMS to come in. You can do CPR all day on your buddy who's been shot, but without defibrillation, it's not going to help him. You may have stopped the bleed, but the hypovolemia induces cardiac arrest. I can compress on him all day, and if the fire department's not coming in, my buddy's not walking away from this. Things like that, officers that get hit with that get overdose from opiates. I mean, they have these new opiates out there that are Narcan resistant. So what do you do when your buddy collapses inside of a house on a drug warrant and you narc them and they don't wake up? Do you have the tools to shock them? Are you able to do that? Like, getting them to really see the state of the picture and how prevalent heart disease is in our community is one of the biggest ways to overcome that. When you show them their mortality rates in their community, when you show them what the numbers look like, most command staff members go, hey, this is a no-brainer. That there's hundreds or thousands of people in our community dying. In my own agency, we lost 1,400 people that we served last year from heart disease just in my county. So, I mean, 18,000 across the state of Arizona, and across the country, it's even worse. So, I mean, when they see the realities of it, most of the time they'll overcome it. But it's about, okay, how are we going to fund it? How are we going to do this? And it's like, okay, we'll help you find the funding. We'll help you write grants. We'll help you look at other unique ways of doing this. But what are we really prioritizing here? How do you put a value on a human life? How do you put a value on your officers' lives? Stop sitting there and playing, oh, well, it's going to cost too much. Yeah, it's hard work. You're in a command staff position. It's part of the job. Suck it up, Buttercup, and do what's right for yourself and your community, because you get these guys that go, well, we're interested, but not right now. Right now, we've got a lot to handle. And you're like, all right, jackass. Like, you will see that happen all the time where these guys are like, well, this is interesting, but who else is doing it first? We don't want to be the first. We don't want to be the last. That's how it was in the beginning. But it's like, look, you give me 30 minutes with your command staff, and I'm going to show them what heart disease really looks like in their community and their officers and what we can do to help it. And most of the time, they're going to see the light and do what's right because they're public servants and they want to make a difference and they want their agency to do well and they want to save lives. So what we all signed up to do is to make a difference in our community. And this is how you make the biggest impact, is by saving lives.
Sure. Yeah. Well, very well said. And we so often fall back on this idea of funding, not enough time, and both of those really just mean it's not a priority, right? And that's the truth of any excuse you'll ever get from executive staff. It's just not a priority. It's capable. We're capable of doing it. It's possible. It's just not a priority. And so I think conversations like this, the work you're doing with Griffith Blue Heart, is amazing stuff. Like, truly, to look at you and what you went through, and to see like what you've taken out of the whole thing, and not just trying to live a life that you feel like you've justified and that you've been that you've done something as a result of giving this second chance, but really exponential, man. Like you say, like, you probably can't count and quantify the amount of people's whose lives you've saved as a direct result of your work by getting this training and these AEDs into agencies. And I like that butterfly effect of your work, and just deciding to do this, because as far as I know, you're the only one out there who's pushing this topic out into the law enforcement field. Your impact on agencies and on the communities that all these agencies you've worked with. Like, dude, that's like generational, you know. It's amazing stuff. And
I hope so, man. It doesn't feel like it at times. You're beating your head against the wall, and even though you make this much progress, you make that much progress for an entire community, for an entire city, for an entire county. But you look at the grander picture, like 10 years ago, we weren't carrying Narcan, we weren't carrying tourniquets. It was like you said, there was pushback. We didn't want to do that. This is the next stage in the evolution. Not just throwing AEDs in the back of the patrol car, but optimizing our programs and giving our officers high performance training and the system they need to do it well. This is what's going to literally save hundreds of thousands of lives per year. This is what's going to gain back our community's trust. Is implementing these life-saving programs. Letting them know we are here to serve you. Who was in your house doing CPR on your 15-year-old child when they collapsed? Who was at what SRO was working on your kid when he collapsed in the classroom? This is how you show the community that we are public servants and we are out there, not the crap they see on the news, the people that we're doing day in and day out. We're out here serving our communities and making incredible impacts. This is what's going to highlight that. And so I really appreciate the kind words, but seeing what keeps me up is the potential of these programs and how big it could be and how many lives can be saved once it spreads like wildfire and law enforcement really adopts this across the spectrum. That's where we're going to see the big changes. And until I get to there, it's hard for me to be satisfied with an agency here, an agency there, do a training here, certify this, get a grant for this, buy AEDs for this whole department. Like, yes, each one of those are incredibly rewarding, but until it really spreads and it becomes like this is the new norm. This is what we do now. Like, it's hard to pat yourself on the back.
I get it. You're a big man. You've got, no pun intended, a big heart, a big mission, and I have no doubt that you're going to get there, and that your name's going to be all over this initiative across the country. Where can people learn more about your organization and the trainings you offer, and how can they find you?
GriffithBlueHeart.com is our website. You'll see our list of schedules. You'll see our podcasts, the articles we write. I'm a contributor for Police One magazine. We do a lot of speaking. Me and my guys go around the country at law enforcement and cardiac conferences. We do in-service training. If your organization wants us to come speak to your guys or your command staff, it's as simple as getting me on with a Zoom with your command staff to see how we can look at your program. There's no cost for us to meet with your command staff and talk about what we can do for your guys. Look me up, Brandon Griffith, on LinkedIn. I'd be able to help you out there. We've got some cool stuff coming on because, cops, unless it's cool, they don't want to be a part of it. So we do like carbine builders, fundraisers. We do mountain bike events. We got a coffee cops and book event coming up where Sheriff Mark Lamb's going to speak for us. Along with Chief Thomas, we're going to have a bunch of law enforcement authors there with our sponsored coffee from Raw Guys. So, we're going to have a lot going on, and come out and be a part of our event, learn about heart disease, learn about how you can protect yourself, and learn how we can implement these life-saving programs in your community.
We'll drop links to all your stuff too in the show notes, so people can just scroll through this episode and find those right there too. If they're out driving or just want easy access, you can find it in the show notes to this episode. Brandon, thanks so much for your time today. Great conversation. Love what you're doing. Love that you took an event that could have just ruined somebody, sucked the life out of them, quite literally, but also figuratively. And you've turned that into a superpower, man. It's great to see. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're new to the show, make sure you check through our catalog of episodes because you're going to find some amazing guests and some great actionable ideas you can take into your day. Also, I want to offer you something I'm very excited about, and it's absolutely free. It's my Tactical Tuesday newsletter. Every Tuesday, I want to bring you a few tactics, tips, and strategies to help you succeed in the week ahead. It may be a book I want to share, some gear I found useful, an inspiring quote, or anything else I think you'd like. To sign up for the Tactical Tuesday email list, you can visit thesquadroom.net/Tactical Tuesdays, or just text your email address to 805-364-2331. That's 805-364-2331. If you didn't catch that, check the show notes for this episode, and you can find it there. And I promise we won't sell or spam your email address. Before we wrap up, I have a challenge for you. If you got something out of this episode, if you were inspired by our conversation today, I want to challenge you right now to take a photo of your podcast player as you're playing this episode, and I want you to share it with 3 friends, people who you think need to hear what we talked about today. Send them this episode and recommend that they listen to it. Also, please consider leaving a review on the podcast player of your choice. If you have a few seconds, please leave a comment with your review because it really helps us spread the word about the show and it helps more cops find the valuable lessons that we have here. Also, join us on Facebook at our Facebook group, follow our page, and on Instagram at The Squad Room. A special thanks to today's sponsor, OfficerPrivacy.com. If cleaning up your name on the internet and making it harder for criminals to find you is important, check them out at OfficerPrivacy.com/The Squad Room, where their deal for you as a listener of this show is they'll give you a free USB data blocker and 1 month of free monitoring when you sign up. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, InTime. InTime is the state-of-the-art, easy-to-use, and incredibly simple way to schedule shifts, improve subpoena compliance, reduce officer fatigue, and manage special events, and much more. Make sure to check them out at intime.com/The Squad Room to learn more about their affordable and simple solutions for public safety. Also, there are some other great companies who support the podcast and support you as well. Go to thesquadroom.net/support to see exclusive deals from Signature Coins, Hard to Kill Fitness, Onnit, Ranger Up, Hardhead Veterans, and Audible. And if you're looking for the best-fitting ballistic helmet that exceeds NIJ standards and won't break the bank, check out hardheadveterans.com and use the coupon code SQUADROOM to get $20 off your helmet. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.